kneel with me softly and pray. When we are met at the end of December, know that my love will stay. Life in the fast lane, love in the last lane, can ever be true. When you return with all that you learned, there'll be someone waiting for you. When you return with all that you learned, there'll be someone waiting for you. I'm going to squeeze one more in before the 7 o'clock command performance. This one is called Deniers. If I can remember. I do not know if man can survive as the seas continue to rise. There's a reason God has his name, so mankind won't take it in vain. I have seen you standing at the door on the battle in another water war. Well, I can't help but wonder out loud how soon we'll find a mushroom cloud. I have seen you crying at night for our sons and our daughters who fight in some war they know pay right. While politicians hide out of sight, and when those fools kneel before the maker's knife, will they plead one last time for their life as they still stand left off mankind? Will deny the moment still deny? I do not know man can survive on this world so completely defiled. When the day is as dark as the night, will we see through the love in their light? There is a time and a season of man, and an end to all things that stand. If you believe that God has a plan, then we must slaughter the lamb. And when Hell's Gate sings forth eternal flame, we shall not leave, but our children can remain. Let there be love that refuses to die. Let there be hope left to bright in the sky. upon the solar wind. The cosmos will wipe away their sins. Sails unfurled in the dark skies at night. Godspeed our children in their flight. And when mankind has run out of time, only heaven will remember our rhyme. How could our father have been so blind? How could our father have kept on denying? I do not know if man can survive as the seas continue to rise. There's a reason God hides his name, so mankind will take it in vain.
Welcome you to the first meeting of the Alameda County's newest water quality advocacy group, the Driftless Water Defenders. We're an Iowa nonprofit, 501c3 eligible group and a membership organization. Money contributed to the organization is tax exempt. If you take deductions, you can do that and designate it. But the membership organization is just that. We're as strong as our members are. We started about 6 weeks ago and have already more than 100 members. We hope that you'll consider becoming a member. There are forms here, and check us out and see whether we have earned your support. My name is Jim LaRue. I am an attorney, largely based in Iowa City, been practicing there for nearly 40 years. And after taking a stint in the governor's office, where I was general counsel and chief of staff during the Culver administration, I came out from that experience, not really having had an opinion when I went in, but coming out, had the view that there were things involving Iowa's environment, air and water, that would not change simply through application of the regulatory apparatus, which I found to be quite deficient, even from the inside. And so started in 2011, environmental law practice. We had quite a visible case that now, after a decade, has finished, an air quality case with citizens up against what's called Grain Processing Corporation in Muscatine, where the result of the litigation was that they were required vastly to improve their technology so that they were not heavily polluting the south end of town. And they also had the invitation by the court and by settlement agreement to pay monetary damages to the citizens who lived down that part of the state. We had two Supreme Court cases. We have a conservative court in Des Moines, but we argue those from a conservative point of view. And that is to say, every person's home is their castle, even in Iowa. And that just because GPC was not being regulated well enough didn't give them the right to pollute. And if it diminished the use and enjoyment of the property of the people who live there, they should be paid money damages. So the result of that lawsuit, GPC spent about $100 million improving their facilities. It's to their own benefit. They'll be in shape to be a world competitor with products that they market, and that's a good thing. The people who were damaged have been paid some damages, and I made a little money too. But at the conclusion of that, which was just about 3 months ago, if you can believe it that long, we were trying to secure the final payments to young children who had been damaged, but we needed to find responsible adults to take the money that was due to them under the order. In the last few years, and particularly this last year, I've been concerned that we need to make improvements on water quality. And I happened to go, I've been attracted to books, reading a lot of them about water quality, and happened to see the title of the book. Chris Jones was doing a reading in Iowa City, and when I got to know Chris and was looking at the book, I saw in the footnotes an article or two that he'd written that in fact I'd been quoting from to good effect in legal lectures I've been offering, spectacular data that only Chris Jones could come up with, that when recited could cause quite a stir in the audience. And I went up to Chris. I did not know him, but I was familiar with his writing. And I explained it as such, and Chris looked exhausted because he's been doing this work on his own after being summarily mistreated, my own interpretation of the facts, by the University of Iowa, who feared pressures from political powers for work that he was doing and just writing truth. And I said, Chris, I won't get in your way, but would you let me help to create an organization that can help to give wind under your wings? And because one person can't do this alone. And he gave it careful thought. Who in the world approached that way would, by the only person wearing a tie and a suit in an evening gathering, he would have reasons to be suspicious. But after a period of time, he said yes, and it's been, I think, a great benefit to Iowans already, and the work that he's doing, and he's doing a lot of other things too, not just with us, but he's president of the Driftless Water Defenders. Now, Terry Mazzoni is sitting in the back as our treasurer, and then there are people in the audience here who are members. I wanted here to, in addition to recognizing Chris Jones, who's sitting here and will be one of our speakers tonight along with Steve Vasey, I wanted to recognize a few more people who are in the audience tonight and some things going on here. Larry and Margaret Stone are here. They're at the table here, and Larry's been a really good help to us. You probably have, when I go places, if I get in a jam, like if I'm going door to door in this part of the state, and I meet someone who looks a little skeptical of me, maybe a little angry, first thing I say is, do you know Larry Stone? And they'll always light up and smile and say, well, I'm a friend of Larry Stone's. And then I'm allowed to move on to the next door. But Larry is here. You'll see him pictured. Isaac Walton League has lent us some posters. You'll see Larry there, photographed for all. They're being commended for the work that they're doing on environmental causes. Phil Specht is there. And then Steve Vasey is wearing all hats. He doesn't have his guitar there. He has his fishing pole, but he's portrayed there too. I want to acknowledge some additional people in the audience. Mary Jane White went door to door with us. You probably know Mary Jane. She's an author, a poet, a former county attorney, and just a good person. And we may have landed on one of your doorsteps. We went in town and nearby neighborhoods on Saturday just to spread the word. We find it's not a bad way to let people know that something's going on. Also in the audience are some law students who are here with us. Nita Marquardt was sitting there in the back. She was sort of our point person. And let me tell you about these University of Iowa law students. It's sort of a new experiment, and in my way of thinking, a successful one. Fred and Charlotte Hubble gave $5 million to the University of Iowa College of Law to start an environmental law institute. And as a part of their projects, they created a fund whereby law students could intern in various capacities. And one place they've been working is helping us to get this new nonprofit started, the Driftless Water Defenders. So we've had 4 L2 students working full-time this summer. One of the projects, each of them took a town meeting. My experience as a sole practitioner lawyer in Iowa, that you're going to be invited to be on any number of boards because they think you can start an organization and they think they can get legal advice cheap. And I say, you better have it under your skill set, know how to organize a public meeting. Some of them do it already. They've been teaching me stuff. Some are doing it for the first time. One of the projects was this. But let me tell you what else they've accomplished. First thing they did was to help to write the draft of a letter. Chris Jones ended up editing it heavily, which is what we wanted him to do. But then he sent it to the EPA and saying the EPA needs to do more in terms of the enforcement of water law in the driftless area. I think we're going to have a reaction that you're going to be hearing about before too long. I think EPA is going to do something. Maybe it's an election year, maybe they want to make a good showing, but I think it's not bad. If government thinks that people are demanding more action to clean the water, it's a good thing, and no small amount of credit if that happens will be the fact that Chris Jones put his name on the letter. But the law students helped to research the letter. It was their first task. But they're doing more than just that. They helped to create the articles of incorporation and the bylaws for this very organization, an important skill for a lawyer in Iowa. They also have done the first draft of what we hope will be a law review article in which they are proposing, and I think when the article is written, it'll actually be co-authored by Chris and myself, but with a lot of work from the law students, proposing that the state of Iowa pass a constitutional amendment which recognizes as a fundamental right citizens' access to clean water. And until we get it established as a fundamental right, it's too often the case that dubious regulations and statutes that have been written by pressure groups, a judge looks at them and said, well, what can I say? The legislature passed it. I'm an unelected judge. I see the words. I don't like it, but they're here. Well, we want them to say, but it violates a fundamental right recognized in the Constitution of Iowa that we have the right to clean water. So I am hoping that by September 1, when the political season wakes up for the final home stretch, that part of the dialogue in our state will be, should we have a constitutional amendment that guarantees recognition of the right of citizens to access to clean water. The final project of the law students is that they've been doing the first draft of the first chapter of what I hope will be an environmental law handbook for citizens, accessible to citizens who want to read it, but also to lawyers, who there's only a handful of lawyers in Iowa who represent plaintiffs in environmental lawsuits. And we need more of them, and we need lawyers who have the courage to do the right thing. We need lawyers who have at least as much courage as Iowa citizens, and they'll feel better about it if they can have a handbook. It gives them, I said, listen, this is your first step. Read the book. We can help you if you want. Well, the law students have been doing all of this work, and this is their last week. In addition to Nina, Mark Prihota, who's not here tonight, Christian Nixon, who was at the front table when he came in, and then Noah Gaber also. Gaber is not here tonight, but they've been a big help. Finally, Kate Robinson, who's sitting here at the front, was a full-time employee of my office before she went to law school, but now she's there in law school. She's also an L2, and she's done a lot of the work necessary to get these meetings going, and I'm appreciative of all of their efforts. Finally, I want to give an opportunity for those in the audience who may be elected officials to raise their hand and just tell us who you are. You may be recognized, you may not, but I'd appreciate it if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself so that people are sure to know that you're here. Would that be all right?
Mark Reiser, Elmwood County Supervisor.
Very good. Any other elected officials here tonight? Yes, sir.
Not much of an election, but I've been elected to the NRCS board for about 20 years.
And give us your name.
Jack Knight.
All right, Jack, thank you.
I was at home, I assumed everybody knew who I was.
Well, just in case someone would forget, I'll give you the chance to repeat it, name IDs. Okay, ma'am?
I am not elected.
Yes.
I am on the Winnebago County Planning and Zoning Commission. It was invoked at this morning's meeting.
Well,
I was not there. I was one of those four who was disparaged for not being there.
you were disparaged, and thank you for coming, and not disparaged by us. The Planning and Zoning Commission had voted 4-2 to recommend to the Board of Supervisors that the zoning ordinances of Winnebago County not be rezoned in a special 3 to 4 acre plot to allow the placement of a manure digester. A plan, it came out in the proceedings today. It was out-of-state investors who selected where this ought to be. They found a piece of land that was next to a natural gas pipeline, and that was where they wanted to put this. The rest of us thought this was going to cause lots of problems. And the two people who had voted on the wrong side of the issue, in my view, in the commission showed up to explain to the audience why they'd voted that way. And the Board of Supervisors criticized those who didn't show who had the majority vote. So it's nice to see you. Thanks for coming. The last thing, is there anyone running for office who doesn't hold an office but who's on the ballot who just wanted to raise their hand and say hello? Well, then these are the preliminary remarks. Our program's going to last probably a little bit past 8 o'clock. The restrooms are on the corner if that's what you need. And we know there's a storm coming sometime. We're not failing to be cognizant of that, but we won't hold you into that, into a dangerous situation. Very briefly, the words of our name were given some thought. And as I recall, every time I was on the wrong side of a vote, Larry Stone held his way and he came up with the best name that we have. I love this idea. Driftless, that's where you are. That's where you are. There's a community, a cultural setting in this part of the state. People think of themselves this way, and it still is associated with, at least in their lifetimes, access to clean water, something. And the defense of that water is a kind of energy which I think is appropriate to the age. That is to say, something lost, we need to keep it, and we're losing something if we don't defend it. The driftless water defendants. What do? We advocate. That is, when we go to public meetings, we talk about the need for cleaner water and to take actions, and we also educate citizens. Some don't realize it, but when they find out, very few people, in fact, public opinion shows that more than 90% of Iowans who are asked support efforts to get cleaner water in Iowa. Finally, the litigating part. This is important. Without a hammer, it's hard to drive a nail. And there are places that we need to be driving nails in order to secure a future which has clean water available to us. So we believe that a fundamental right and entitlement to the access to clean water is now at risk, and it has been now for a couple of decades, but it's only accelerating in some parts of the state, and this is one. And that the impact of policies and practices designed, legislated, and implemented by the largest and more concentrated and least regulated corporation barons in the history of our state and in our nation are the ones who are causing this to move forward in an adverse direction. And today we start to push back. It is fitting, I know that there's a couple here from Lansing. I heard that through the grapevine or near Lansing, and by chance I have a Lansing story for you. It's fitting that a group dedicated to the citizens' exercise of their fundamental right to the access of clean water would be held in Waukon, Alameda County, Iowa. From even prehistory days, the purity of the waters here were a defining characteristic of the area, venerated by the native peoples who were here, who hunted, camped, worshiped near the waters, whose names, such as Waukon, Alameda, Winneshiek, are still with us and a part of who citizens are. The earliest settlers and travelers to our state in the early and mid-19th century were people who built their lives and communities proximately to those water sources. And the water sources were noted for their unique purity. Consider this excerpt from one of the first histories written about Alameda County, a volume called Past and Present of Alameda County, Volume 1, published more than a century ago in 1913, that I found in the shelves of the Iowa State Historical Society Library. This is an account by someone named David B. Raymond of the state of Ohio, who came to Iowa for a visit, and his recollections recorded in this history of his journey in 1877 from Ohio to Iowa and arriving near Lansing. As he was leaving one day from Lansing to the next, headed for Waukon, Mr. Raymond described, quote, "A mile or more out, we came to the first of Iowa's famous springs. The sparkling water came gushing out of the limestone rock at the foot of the bluff and dashed across the road as if to hurry on to mingle with the Father of waters. I drank from this spring, my first square drink of Iowa soil, on Iowa soil, and many times after I stopped to drink of this sparkling water." Well, today, one of Iowa's most beautiful rivers, the Upper Iowa River, runs through the northern part of Alameda County. The southern part is the Yellow River, the eastern boundary created by the Mississippi River. Historically, the area's most thriving businesses, its breweries and other companies related to water-related businesses and industries, they have historically drawn upon their access to quality water. Over the years, people have come throughout Iowa to camp, fish, and bicycle, and to be near the waters that they find so comforting here. Citizens individually, through their wells and collectively through their city water departments are waters that are drawn from the rivers and the aquifers, traditionally drawing high quality water, feel the quality of the water threatened by recent events. The value that citizens place today on the fundamental right to access clean water is consistent with the values of the original settlers of this area. But the recent and alarming trends, particularly those of what might be called industrial agriculture, have placed this present need, this history, at grave risk. As Iowans' early settlers and visitors, people such as David B. Raymond, visitor from Ohio, and an 1877 diary recognized the purity of this region's waters, made in this region, in the state of Iowa, are unique and should be preserved. In Iowa, unlike many foreign nations and other states of the United States, the water, by statute, belongs to the people of Iowa, of the Iowans, by Iowans, for Iowans, and not to private individuals, to what we might call the barons. Hear the words of the Iowa Code, which states that our rivers, streams, and aquifers are, quote, public water and public wealth of the people of our state. It's in the code. It's not the wealth of out-of-state financiers with eyes on federal tax credits so that they might construct polluting facilities, leading us to contend with poisoned water and unusable public beaches and lakes. It's not the wealth of corporations, whether they be national or local, no matter how big or how powerful. No, public water is public wealth of the people of our state. To form good policies, we must start with the truth. And the truth is that the quality of our water is worsening. The quantity of our water is diminishing. It is time to stop the trends, and that's why we're here tonight. Iowans have a fundamental natural right to access clean water. That right is threatened, and it's time for us to defend it. Two speakers will join us tonight, offering points of view. First, our troubadour, Steve Acey, longtime trout fisherman with a love affair with Iowa's trout fishing streams, has risen to become one of the state's most knowledgeable and most articulate advocates for the enforcement of Iowa water laws. He's been recognized by Iowa's district court as an expert in the field of water and the technologies that allow him to understand it better. He's been most prominently noted in the Supreme Beef litigation, just one county over in Clayton County, where he explained to the court the fragility of the landforms that surrounded Supreme Beef's facility there at Bloody Run Creek. So, Steve, thank you for your advocacy, which is very effective, and thank you for singing to us tonight, and welcome to our program.
Up in the Bloody Run Creek area, in trying to create some sanity in this issue of a huge feeding operation. So this is Supreme Beef, and they have, each of these barns is 200 yards long, each of them. And there are 6 of them, so they have a capacity of 11,000 head of cattle, and I think most of you here are familiar with the Supreme Beef issue. It's located directly in the headwaters of Bloody Run Creek. In fact, there is an intermittent stream that used to flow right through here. That is, in fact, feeder creek to Bloody Run Creek. And so they've put their earth and manure basin right in the middle of that intermittent stream. That's where they put it. There are sinkholes in this area. There are 5 sinkholes here. They are located only 300 feet from these barns. Now, if you drive by this or look at aerial pictures of this, it's pretty clear it's a beef confinement operation. That's what anybody looking at it would say. But under Iowa code, they've written the rules in a manner that they claim to be an open feedlot. So there's no cattle that ever wander around outside these buildings. That's not happening. If it had been confinement, designated as such, then the proximity to these sinkholes would have prohibited it. So if it had been a confinement, then the supervisors of Clayton County would have been able to do a master matrix process, and that involves the public. And in that master matrix process, they actually consider environmental issues. But because it was called an open feedlot, they managed to dodge the entire master matrix public comment route, and they managed to locate next to sinkholes, and they managed to put an obstruction in a floodway, and they've done all of that. These are the manure disposal fields, or manure application fields, let's be fair. I don't like to call them manure disposal fields. Manure is a perfectly good fertilizer. And in fact, even liquid manure, which is I'm not a big fan of storing manure in basins. I think there's other ways. But even that, if applied in the right amounts in the right locations, there's justification for that. But that's not what's happening in these manure management plans that are being written and rubber stamped by DNR. They're not written correctly. They do not apply manure in the right amounts in the right locations. And nobody's talking about that. Nobody's standing up and saying, oh, I've looked at this manure management plan that you just approved, DNR, and I've torn it apart from a technical perspective, and it's wrong. It's just totally wrong. And see, boards of supervisors could do that. Boards of supervisors don't have authority to prevent a manure plan from being approved, but they have standing if one is approved. And if their experts look at it and say, no, DNR has done an administrative review only, they've not done a technical review, the plan is full of faults, it's allowing more manure to be spread in areas where it shouldn't be, supervisors have standing to demand that DNR fix those plans. And that's the message for our Board of Supervisor friend who's here. And that's the message I tried to get across this morning to the Winnebago County Board of Supervisors. But this is where the manure is being spread. And you can see this is the Bloody Run Creek watershed. This is Bloody Run Creek. You notice that some of these fields are extremely close to the fishable portion. They're right near Spook Cave, which is where the fishable portion of Bloody Run Creek starts. And so it's been a bad situation all around, and we're still have some litigation going on, and there may be additional litigation, but I won't belabor that. This is the real consequence of that. There is a neighbor who lives right here. Her name is Tammy Thompson, her and her husband and her family. They raise goats, and they're trying to get certified so that their goat milk can be used in certain processes, and that there's a number of certification hoops they jump through. And in doing that, their water was tested and they did not qualify. They could not become certified. The water in their well had nitrates and E. coli. So what did they have to do? They had to dig a new well. They kept digging and testing until they finally had water that met their criteria. They had to dig 650 feet to get to water that could pass the chemical criteria. And it cost the Thompsons $65,000 to drill that well. Now, they are located right across the street from Supreme Beef. All of these fields have been receiving manure from Supreme Beef and from other operations in the area, even before Supreme Beef. But that's what's happening to your aquifers. Your shallow aquifers are getting polluted by nitrate and E. coli. You're having to go all the way down into the Jordan. And even that, because the Jordan is not a confined aquifer in eastern Clayton County, even that is going to become polluted. Jordan aquifer, that's 1,000-year-old water. And once you've polluted that, you can't do anything about it. So that's pretty much all I would like to say about this. You can see that in their old wells, they didn't have any pollutant until about 2010, and then all of a sudden they were getting pollution. And then they drilled a new well, as I said, after they got to 650 feet, they finally had clean water. So in Clayton County, and probably in Alameda County, people are literally drilling to get clean water. Every time a well gets drilled, it gets drilled deeper than the previous well. So that's all I wanted to say. That's the points I wanted to make. I appreciate you all coming here. So So I'll hand this back over to Jim.
Why don't you keep that mic?
Okay.
Thank you so very much, Steve. What I thought the plan would be, Chris Jones, our next speaker, upon the conclusion of his remarks, if there were questions or comments that people wanted to make from the audience, we can do that. And then we'll close the program. I'll have a few concluding remarks to make. But our next speaker is Chris Jones. You may be familiar with his book. We have copies of it for sale, Swine Republic, recognized as it was by the Library of Congress as a notable book. Chris is about the most straightforward, genuine person you will meet, but I got a kick out of this the other day, knowing from the releases that I read and we've put out that the recognition day from the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. was coming in August. I was checking up with him just to see how is that going. And Chris said, well, I'm not able to attend. What do you mean? He says, well, I had a fishing trip scheduled for that time. And I've had that reservation for a long time, so I'm just not able to go. Not many people would do or say that, but I got a kick out of it. So Chris has been speaking truth to Iowans, giving Iowans courage by his writing to speak truth to power. And we're just delighted that Chris Jones would agree to be president of the Driftless Water Defenders. And he's here tonight to tell you some things that I'm sure you'll find very interesting.
Okay, Jim, thanks for that generous introduction. And I just will tell you, if you like my writing, you probably like the writing more than you would like me. If you dislike the writing, you probably dislike the writing more than you would dislike me. And so if you've read any of it, I'd say keep that in mind. And so I'll give you a little history here. I worked at the Des Moines Water Works for quite a while. I worked at the Iowa Soybean Association, and I worked at the University of Iowa, and I retired a year ago. And I'm originally from Ankeny. My folks are from Knoxville in southeast Iowa. And when I had been at the university about 3 or 4 years, I was managing the university's network of water quality sensors that are deployed around the state. And there was a farmer in Calhoun County that contacted us and said he would like to have a couple of sensors on the drainage ditch that ran through his property. And so he was wanting to do some things on his field, and he wanted to do some water monitoring in the drainage ditches. And we said, sure, we'll do that. And so we went up there to put the equipment in, my staff did. And while they were there, several farmers in the area came and sort of menaced them and parked their trucks and watched what they were doing and so on and so forth. And then not long after that, we received word that Farm Bureau in West Des Moines wanted us to come over there and talk about these water quality sensors. And so me and 2 other guys from the University of Iowa and 3 people from Iowa State went to Farm Bureau that day in West Des Moines, where we were told in no uncertain terms that those water quality sensors were not going to go in that ditch. And I'm just thinking, this was on private property, right? And the farmer asked us to do this, and yet we were being told how we could do our work. And on that day, I just decided, I had to do my job a little differently, because I just felt that I was a public servant. The taxpayers were paying my salary. I'm supposed to be working for the common good, right? And here is a private entity telling me I shouldn't do that. And it bothered me, right? And so from that day forward, I did my job a little differently than what I had been doing it. And, I'd like to think things have changed a little bit, but some of the stuff I heard this morning just astonished me. And I'll just tell you, at this supervisors meeting, one of the supervisors, this is a county supervisor, Winnebago County, told the audience, if you don't like what's going on this farm, then you should come and buy it. Or if that farm goes up for sale and you don't like what's been going on there, you should just go buy that farm. Well, come on, is that really where we're at in the state of Iowa? That we have an industry that occupies 85% of our land, and it's so belligerent that it tells us that if we don't like what we're doing, to basically just lump it, right? And if we can afford the millions to buy the farm, that's what we should do when it comes up for sale. I mean, I don't get it. I just don't get it. How we let this go on, how we permit this as citizens to go on. There were several other things I heard this morning that just kind of blew my socks off. I couldn't believe it. The one guy that criticized the 4 Plan and Zoning Commission people for not being at the meeting also said that the audience was not representative of the county, right? That even though the audience had nearly unanimous agreement in opposition to the digester, that we weren't representative of the county. You know, that all the other people that couldn't come to that meeting on Monday morning at 10 o'clock, you know, maybe didn't feel the same way as the people at the meeting. But yet he criticized the 4 planning and zoning people for not being there. And so the hypocrisy, I just don't get it. And I think things have to change here. And so, you know, I worked in academia. I'm not a big fan of academia. And I'll tell you, when you work in academia, you see a lot of stuff that I call vanity projects, okay? And they're designed to raise the profile or raise the self-esteem of the person running the project. This is not a vanity project, okay? We are here to change things. We are here to affect change and to empower people, right? To empower people to demand change in our water. And I've come to be fond of reading little things from books, and I don't know how many people have heard of Wallace Stegner. Maybe the most famous writer to come from Iowa. He was born in Lake Mills, Iowa. He went to the University of Iowa, spent most of his life in the western United States, and he had a great interest in water because he saw how the quantity and quality of water that were available to a society shaped the society. And he was born in 1909. He wrote this, published it in 1992. And so this was written, 32 years ago, right? He says, as the country at large grows more stressful as a dwelling place, and would we all agree that this country has gotten to be a more stressful place to live? It certainly has. But as he says, as the country at large grows more stressful as a dwelling place, the quiet remoteness and solitude of a week on a wild river become more and more precious to more and more people. It is a good question whether we may not need that silence, space, and solitude for the healing of our raw spirits more than we need surplus cotton and alfalfa produced for private profit at great public expense. So, of course, we have no cotton and we have very little alfalfa, but we have lots of corn and soybeans. And we all know we've produced them in surplus. We produce them in surplus. We most certainly do. The amount of corn calories that we send to ethanol plants exceeds the caloric requirements of every person in the United States in aggregate. Okay, that's how anxious and eager we are to grow corn. And so, we need to have an idea here of, what is the balance here? And we hear people on the ag side, well, we need a balance. We need a balance between the agriculture and the environment. Well, hey, I look out there, there ain't no balance, right? It looks pretty out of balance to me. And we have this part of the state through a geological accident that still has some environmental integrity. okay? Because of its proximity, the Mississippi River and the slope of so much of the land, a lot of it can't be cropped. The rivers run with some speed, and so the silt and soil gets scoured out of the river bottoms, and so we still have some ecological integrity in our streams and on the landscape. And so we have this little island, right? This little island in a corn desert. And I think we need to protect this. So much of the state is a lost cause. It really is. If you go to western Iowa and you look at the streams, they are not coming back, okay? If anybody's seen the Boyer River, or the Booyer River as they call it there, or the Floyd River, or the lower reaches of the Little Sioux, or the Soldier River, they're terrible. They're never coming back. We need to fight tooth and nail to keep that from happening here. Okay? And so I'm going to show some slides tonight. And so when we look at Iowa, and about 31% of the state drains the Missouri River, about 69% drains the upper Mississippi River. In those 2 months, 102 million pounds of nitrogen lost to the Missouri River, 241 million pounds lost to the upper Mississippi River. And so think about this. Everybody's seen these, right? Nurse tanks. About one of these left the state every minute during May and June. One of these, the contents of one of these left the state in our streams every minute. That's how much we're losing. Turkey River, nearby here, 17.7 million pounds of nitrogen went down the Turkey River in 2 months. That's about 31 pounds of nitrogen per crop acre were lost from the Turkey watershed. The Maquoketa, 12.2 million pounds. The Iowa Cedar at the bottom there, Wapello, Iowa, 89 million pounds, 2 months. Skunk River, 21 million pounds. The Wapsie, 20. The Des Moines River Basin, 58 million pounds. Little Sioux, 20 million. The Floyd, 7.7 million. The Nishnabotna, 5 million. The Nottoway, 3.2 million. And so, yes, it has been wet. And so the industry's response to all this is, well, it's the weather, right? It's the weather. Well, yes, it has been wet, especially in northwest Iowa. But the industry can design its systems around the expected range of weather conditions or not, okay? Or not. Except for that huge storm in northwest Iowa, this amount of precipitation should not be a surprise to us, okay? We live in the middle of a continent. By virtue of that, our weather is extreme and dynamic, and so we can design our systems around the expected range of conditions or not. We don't make the industry do that. We don't make laws that make the industry design its systems to cope with these weather events. And so when people want to blame this on the weather, I just say, no, that doesn't make sense to me. And so we hear the messaging all the time about the nutrient strategy. And like I said, there's so much propaganda around this. And we hear all the time how there's momentum. There's momentum to improving water quality in Iowa. Here's this 2015. Water quality efforts gaining momentum. This is 2016. Branstad seeks momentum on water quality tour. Here's 2021. Conservation and water quality momentum. 2022. Conservation water quality progress gaining momentum. Even the NGOs pick up on this language. Center for Rural Affairs, building momentum for watershed management, 2022. This one is Polk County, our agencies too, latch on to the industry rhetoric on this. A Day at the Farm, Defining a Decade of Momentum, 2023. And here's Mike Nagg, only last month, talking about momentum. Momentum, right? But the water here has been bad for my entire life, right? My entire life. I'm 63 years old. The water has been bad here my entire life. I'm tired of hearing about this stuff. I want to see some action, and I want to see some quantifiable improvements in our water. And so we hear, all the time, this saying, we all want clean water. I even put a chapter in my book, stop saying we all want clean water. I get so exhausted hearing that. We all want clean water like we all want to be thin, right? Everybody likes that idea in the abstract, but we're not willing to do the work to do it, to get there, right? And so I tell people, this isn't about partnerships, and it isn't about projects, and it isn't about us sitting down at the table with the stakeholders and all these other things that we've been talking about for 30 years, that haven't brought us the water quality we want. What this is about is power, okay? What this is about is power. The industry has the power. We don't. And I heard a county supervisor say today in a public meeting, if you don't like it, go buy that farm. Okay, that's power. That's power when a person can tell you that in a public meeting. Okay, C.S. Lewis, famous writer, what we call man's power over nature turns out to be power exercised by some men over other men with nature as its instrument. I'm convinced that is the situation here in Iowa. Okay? We have lost control of our land. We've lost control of the quality of our natural resources. I have people come up to me all the time when I do programs and they say, what can I do? What can I do? It seems so hopeless. Maybe I should just move. What they're expressing to me there is they have no power. And so we are trying to build power, okay, for citizens. We're trying to empower citizens to affect change and demand change. And I have one other one here. This guy, a philosopher from France, the total domination of nature inevitably entails a domination of the people by the techniques of domination. And so we're being dominated by the industry. I don't know how many times I heard this morning people would make a comment about the pollution. And how many times do they always say, but I have nothing against the farmers. I don't like this idea, but it's nothing against the farmers. I'm not against the farmers. I must have heard that 20 times this morning. And, I thought then, man, I've been hearing that a lot over the years. And do we ever say that about any other occupation? I'm not against the barbers, or I'm not against the teachers, or I'm not against truck drivers, or whoever. We don't say that. We are all so worried about the industry getting mad at us, right? And we're also worried about being seen as being against the farmer or against agriculture. Look, nobody's against agriculture. Nobody's against food. Nobody's against the farmer. What we're against is the pollution, right? We're against the pollution. And so that's the message we need to carry. We need to object to things like this obscenity, not because we're against the farmer, but because we're against the pollution, right? And so I think I have one more thing here from Stegner to read, and I'll be done. I lost it here, I think. I think this is a message that, you know, we need to have the courage to give to agriculture. So often we hear, you know, well, I got to earn a living, right? Well, guess what? You know, a lot of farmers in Iowa make a pretty good living. When I worked at Soybean Association, this is no kidding. This is no kidding. Well, I probably shouldn't tell that story. No, I'm not going to. But here, Stegner says, if you believe that the world owes you not merely a living but a bonanza, then restrictive laws are only an irritation and a challenge. And so we hear all the time how, you know, we can't have regulation. We can't have regulation. We have allowed an industry to control 85% of the state's land, and they demand not to be regulated. I object to that. I think we need laws. We need laws. We need to push for that idea. Yes, I know the way the legislature is presently comprised, you know, the chances of regulating anything in Iowa for agriculture is small. But what we need to do is we need to push that, and we need to make the industry defend the indefensible. Okay? Larry Stone and Steve Vasey made the industry defend the indefensible here. They prevailed, right? They prevailed, but they had to defend the indefensible. We see people bring up the idea of buffering streams, and a bill was proposed in the legislature this year to do that. A couple years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, the conservation districts of Iowa said there should be a 30-foot buffer on all perennial streams in Iowa. NEG rejected it, never got to the legislature. But we need to do those things, even when it's hopeless, even when it has no chance of becoming law. We need to push it because we make the industry defend the indefensible. If they want to plant crops right up to the brink of the stream, okay, defend that practice. Defend that practice. We've known, you know, that's conservation 101, right? We've known that for 50 years. Don't do that. Yet you drive across Iowa, you see it everywhere. Iowa State's been putting out guidance on fall tillage since the 80s. It all says one thing: don't do it. Yet we drive across Iowa in November and you see 70% of it is tilled up. Why don't we have laws to restrict these sorts of things? We really need to demand that. And so I'll just finish here by saying, you know, there's never any victories here for the environment. We never win, right? We never win. We had some favorable rulings on the Supreme Beef thing. Ultimately, we didn't win. But when we try to protect things, you have to remember, it's never fully protected. All we do is we get a stay of execution. Okay? We need to work to get stays of execution on the driftless area. Because believe me, the industry will take it if they can. They will take it and they will turn it into what the rest of Iowa looks like. There can be no doubt about that. We see this. We see somebody wanting to bring 10,000 dairy cattle into a place west of Decorah. There is no doubt that the industry will come up here and turn this into the rest of the state. And so we need to fight. We need to fight like hell to save it. So thanks for listening and thanks for coming tonight.